Okay. There are so many angles from which we can speak about life and particularly what we're going to be talking about this evening. Um, and so the narrative of how we may do this from one Sunday to another may change in different ways, but it always is going to center around the principle of wholeness. And I don't know how many of you may be familiar with or keep up to date with the science of things, which is something that I do. But modern science and discoveries tell us that the world in which we live and the universe in which we live um, is all made of one thing. We may call it energy, and everything, all physical matter emerges out of a single field of existence. Some may call it the unified field. Quantum science calls it the unified field. And there is a principle within that they call quantum entanglement. And if you're not familiar with that, it's an interesting concept where everything is in the universe is interconnected. Everything in creation is inseparable. Everything is unified and cannot be separated. And it's an interesting concept because it's something that the sages and the mystics of ancient times have always known that life is encompassed as a whole. And in quantum entanglement, an interesting experiment that they do is that if you took like an atom and you split it and you put one part of the atom in one place and the other one hundreds or thousands of miles away, and if you stimulate one part of the atom, the other part will respond in exactly the same time. In other words, they call it superposition, whereas there is no distance between the two. You can separate them at the different corners of the galaxy. If you stimulate one, the other one will move in exactly the same time and exactly the same way. And it's interesting because when you bring that down, right down to us and to our very own lives, wholeness is the concept that if we can live truly whole and truly complete, we would experience a life that is unbelievable, that is unimaginable. And so what we are talking about is really just, the tip of the iceberg of a understanding of a reality that how we are designed and are meant to live, that if we can align with that, if we can bring that into our personal reality, we would begin to experience a quality of life and a level of living that would be considered unreal. But it's truly the place where we can create the lives that we so desire, whatever that might be, and where nothing is impossible to us. And so that's really the fundamentals and the framework of what we're really talking about. And it's difficult to capture that whole picture. But I just wanted to say that as to frame what we're going to be talking about our lives and the wholeness of our lives, and how we can experience living super naturally. Because our natural inherent nature is to be whole and to be complete in every way. We may not be aware of it, but that really is the reality. I'm also going to talk in concert with that about an extraordinary technology that supports optimal well being. And it forms a bridge that helps us in our journey to be living a whole and complete life, because it helps us to bridge and to create a synergy between mind and body that helps us to unlock our potential in ways that is uncommon. And so I'm going to talk about that because it supports the process. And let's begin by taking a look at this, because here we are today, and where we have come to in our lives is the sum total of all the choices that we've made. And the experiences of our life really can only come from two vibrational states. There's only two vibrational states from which we can live. One is love and one is fear. There really is no middle ground to it. There are times when we may flip between one and the other, but we will be actually grounded. One will be more dominant, in which we will be grounded. For most of us, we are grounded in a way in how we have been conditioned by society and our culture. And for most of us, it takes us down a path where when we get to the end of the line, and that is whichever path we will take, there's a finish line one day. But most of us, when we go the way of fear, if our lives are rooted in that reality, when we get to the finish line one day, life is usually filled with regret, not for the way that we have lived, but for the way we wish we had lived. And that's usually a life of struggle, a life of survival, a life of lack and limitation, a life where we struggle to discover and define our potential and what our true purpose for life is. It's really just a life of survival and striving and trying to figure life out. And we settle for. We take our dreams and our hopes and we bring them down into a little narrow box and we settle for what life is, because we never really get to recognize who we are, what our potential is, and what we're capable of. And that happens when life is rooted in that vibrational state of fear. The other side is a vibrational state of love, which is inherently our true essence of being. This is unknown to most of us because of how we are conditioned by society and by culture. But when we can travel this road, it is one that when the finish line approaches, it is one of satisfaction, not regret. It is one where we are fulfilled, it's a life of empowerment, a life of growth, abundance. It's a life of prosperity. It's a life where everything works out for us. It's a life where life is not feeling like a fight or a struggle. Life is a flow. It's not a fight. It's a ease. It's a joy. Life, everything works out for us this way. And when we get to that finish line, we are satisfied with the way we have lived. When we travel that side of love, it's a life of freedom and thriving. And this is where a life of wholeness is. This is where we feel secured in love for ourselves, affirmed in our self-worth. We live true to our values, and we're sovereign and steadfast in our beliefs and our purpose. Those things become clear to us, and we are authentic in our expressions, in the way we live, and we live with an assured awareness. We live intentionally, we live consciously, we live aware of every step and every moment of life as we go through life. On the other side, when our vibrational state emerges from fear, it's one where life is entangled and we're always striving. It's a fractured way of living. And we are insecure in our love for self. We're insecure about ourselves, period. Our sense of worth and value is obscured because it's defined by external realities, because we live by the expectations of others. And we're taught to define worth and value by what we have and what we own and how we are perceived and how we are accepted. Those types of things is what define us. And so we conform to societal standards. And it's often a life where our expression is more pretensive than it is authentic. And we get entangled with life's uncertainties. And life is a struggle. And so that struggle is, we want to be more disciplined. We want to be consistent. We want to not procrastinate. We want to be able to live effectively so that we can make our lives what we dream it can be. And it causes us to approach life in an inverted and backward way, unknown to us. And so my hope is that what we're going to talk about is help us to change that around, where wherever we may be, the road ahead of us, what our experience of life can be is in our hands to determine. And it's going to be by the choices we made that brought us to here. It will be the choices that we make going forward. One of the things that I think is useful and to be mindful of is a scripture that has helped me in being able to have the right perspective on things, is that teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And it's not about counting your number of days, it's being aware that the life that we have on this earth is limited, and that to number our days is to be aware of that limitation of time, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. The wisdom is that we should live intentionally, live purposefully, live with vision and focus, live with meaning and value, to live life in such a way that at the end of the journey, it was a journey well worth living. And what we left behind was a legacy that in some way benefited those that will come after us. And so that's where we're going. And it all falls under the banner of restoring our health and awakening our life. I spent 25 years in the practice of naturopathic medicine. And in those years of clinical practice, I've learned that health is far more than how we have been taught to think about it. And it has become part of what we teach today in a new perspective, which actually is defined by the World Health Organization, but it's not really given to us in terms of perspective in practical application. So when we say restore your health, awaken your life, it is really a formula to take us to this place of wholeness, a formula where we can awaken to our true potential, our true capacity, and live way beyond what we may think is even possible. And we can find that when we look at the definition of health, as stated by the World Health Organization, that health is a state of complete physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And if we can restore our health, which is a state of being that is complete, and that complete state encompasses every dimension of our lives, our physical wellness, our mental and emotional wellness, our spiritual wellness, and our social wellness, and how they all interconnect in harmony and in flow. And it's not about how your body feels and functions alone. That health is way more than that. Yes, it includes us caring for our bodies, our body temple feeling and functioning at its best. But that really is completely dependent on how our physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being, how aligned it is. And so we're thinking about health as a state of being, not a feeling or function, but a state of being that is aligned and complete. Complete meaning that nothing is missing and everything is in order. And that a complete alignment is our wholeness of personal well being, physically, mentally, and spiritually, and how that fits into the framework of life, the social framework, and our interactions with other human beings in a way that maintains that alignment. That is what true health is. That is what will awaken our lives and put us on that path. So when we have to restore our health because there is a loss of health and it is a global pandemic. That loss of health, which is the loss of alignment, is what has led to the pandemic of human struggle that is across the face of the earth today. And life was never meant to be an uphill struggle. When we look at the news, when we interact with people across in our daily lives, when we see what's happening across the world, it appears to us as though human struggle is becoming more and more rampant. People are finding that life is becoming more stressful, more difficult to cope with. We are seeing more social conflicts, more geopolitical tensions. And so, our personal well being, physically, mentally, and spiritually, there is more escalating percentages of lifestyle diseases, mental and cognitive decline. We're seeing increasing healthcare costs to be able to cope, people lacking more value and purpose and meaning and direction in life. People are becoming distorted in their sense of identity. Our whole personal well being, we're seeing how distorted and out of order that has become. And the reflection of that is the chronic escalation in the percentages of lifestyle diseases, the style of living that has compromised how our mind and our body is working. That overflows into the social framework because if we are not balanced and have our own personal well-being in order, there is no way that it can flow into our relationships. It must necessarily also project outwards. And so, in the social areas of life, there's more social conflicts and social polarizations, more cultural fragmentations, more inauthentic expressions. People are more lost than they've been in what they want with their lives. So you're seeing more suicidal rates. People are now turning more and more to substances to cope with life. And then that overflows further into the economic part of our lives. We cannot separate the economic um, section from our social and our personal because the socio-economic framework that we live within is inseparable. The entire social structure of life is undergirded by an economic framework. And so it's inseparable. And while we need to have this all working together. The thing is, because if money is scarce, which it is for most people, most of us, according to statistics, we're living paycheck to paycheck. 70% of us, 70% of modern households, we live with debt. We're always trying to pay bills, always trying to catch up. In fact, the entire world is in debt. And so, on the economic side of things, when money is not sufficient, it has a significant impact on how we are able to manage a lot of the affairs of our lives. And so we spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of focus in looking for opportunities, in looking how to gain wealth and how to create more money, and that's fine. But here's what we don't understand, that that is not going after prosperity or financial prosperity the correct way. The model and the formula is that it must start from me and you, and it must flow outward. When we understand the principles as is unfolded in our workshops, is that if I could become aligned in my own life, physically, mentally, and spiritually, it naturally will overflow into the social framework in my relationships, be it at home, socially, on the job, etc. That naturally becomes harmonious. There will be far less social conflict according to the degree that I am aligned in my life, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And once that happens, the overflow from our social sector is that it overflows into the prosperity of our lives. Now, that is difficult to see because it is something that has to be experienced. But the formula is that if we want to be healthy and prosperous, it doesn't begin by putting our efforts in to how to get more so that we can do more, but it is about how to become more, meaning how to be all of who you really are. And that only happens in personal alignment, which overflows socially and it overflows into economic prosperity. I'm not just saying this from the principles that unfold in our workshops, which we learn about, but also it becomes the experience of our lives when we put it into practical application. And that alignment formula begins with you must have love for yourself. And this is what takes us down that path where our vibrational state of living from love begins. It begins with love for self, which overflows to love for others, and that overflows into prosperity. When we have love for ourselves, we can live a more of a healthy, disease free life that's vibrant, energetic, and effective. And when we do that, our social interactions in life is going to be far more harmonious. In fact, in the area of health and wellness, the number one marker for longevity and quality of life is relationships. And those relationships is entirely dependent upon how we are aligned in our own lives. And so if you look at the social statistics as well, they also tell us that one of the, not just social statistics, but in psychology and in personal well-being, all the statistics tell us that one of the biggest deficiencies that the average human being lives with is a lack of love for self. And that really is one of our greatest deficiencies. And it's something that we need to cultivate because it is inherently our true essence of being, but it's also unknown to us because we're not aware of our true sense of who we really are as a being of spirit. And that's where I want to go next. And so when we live out of alignment, we live what we, in our modern language, we say we live stressful lives, and it brings a life of struggle because it obscures our true potential, because it obscures our true sense of being, of who we really are. And so that's something that we have to get a better handle on. And so you and I, we are essentially beings of spirit. What does that mean? It simply means that within our makeup as a human being, there is a part of us that is intangible. You can't scan it with a machine. You can't hook it up and measure it because it's invisible, it's intangible, and we can define it as consciousness. For now, let's just define it as consciousness. It is your awareness of yourself. Then there is our mind, and then there is our body. Our mind is the conduit through which consciousness, through our essence of being, will flow into body, expressing into the world as living. How we express ourselves through living into this world as a being of spirit, this is the natural order of flow from the inside out. Why? Because the natural creative order of life is that everything visible emanates from the invisible. That's the law of creation. It flows from invisible to visible, in this case, from inside out. So you and I, as beings of spirit, consciousness, the essence of which is awareness, unfolds into this dimension we call mind. Mind, through the central nervous system, seamlessly connects into this physical vessel, and it has life because consciousness gives it life. If there was no consciousness, this would be a corpse on the ground. The very life of consciousness flows and enlivens and animates this body through mind. And what we have to understand is that the condition of the body has everything to do with the quality of our consciousness, and the quality of our state of mind will determine the quality of our body and how we express into this world. And so health is when spirit, mind, and body are aligned in harmony. It's like three notes of a chord. If you play the notes individually, they have their distinct sounds. But when you play the three notes together as a chord, it has a completely different harmony to it. Health is when that harmony exists, when the three play as one, as a chord. They're not three different parts. It is one part that plays in three harmonious ways as one. And so consciousness, the quality of consciousness, which is defined by unity, growth, and abundance as a heading, that flows through us expressed as love, peace, and joy. That's our natural resonant state. And it's aligned with the creative principle of life, which is oneness. Everything in creation is interconnected to be one. We will learn that, and we learn that in our workshops. And once it's aligned with that, we are in the natural flow of the creative order. Consciousness unfolds into awareness, giving rise to mind, which determines the quality of our life according to how our mind is oriented. It is according to what our mind identifies with as our state of being. In other words, our mind, which is the bridge between the two, our mind is either oriented towards our essential nature, or our mind is oriented towards our physical nature. You see, the mind sets the condition for the body according to how the mind is oriented. In other words, our mind, which is what's navigating and orchestrating experience, the mind is the bridge between the two that determines how life is going to be experienced and the quality of it. The mind is what's orchestrating that, what's navigating that, what's interpreting and transacting this whole thing we call life. It's happening in mind, which is why our mind is so important. And it's one of the things that we ignore almost throughout our lives. We give no attention to harnessing our minds. And as a result, we are almost ignorant to how powerful it is and how it's actually shaping our lives every day. And so, but the mind is either going to be conditioned and oriented according to how it's been conditioned by external values, or how it's been conditioned by internal values. Whichever one is oriented towards is what will condition it and what and how it will interpret and navigate and orchestrate how we will experience life. And that's just trying to put it simply. But in order to restore our health, which is to restore the alignment, so that we could live our best possible life, we have to reorient the mind. Now, when the mind is oriented from our spiritual nature, in other words, it's aligned with truth and love, when it's aligned with those qualities that come from there, we navigate life completely different. We even see life completely different. We see life as a whole. We see life in oneness. We see life as a unity. We perceive life as unity. That cannot be known, that can only be experienced because we're talking about the dimension of our life that is intangible. This is what you and I know. This is because this is how we've been conditioned from the time we were a child. This is how we've been conditioned. Our minds have been conditioned by the outer values or the worldly values around us. And so the outer and external reality is what we know to be true and what has shaped and conditioned our thinking and our mindsets. But when the mind is oriented from the outside, we see life in separation because life becomes fear based, whereas when it's from the inside, it's love based. This is foreign to most of us because we have learned it a different way. When our mind is conditioned by the external realities of life, we see life in separation. So there's always a us or them. We don't see humanity as one. It's always a separation. It's always, I must win, somebody must lose. It must always a comparison. There is always this competing. There is always judgments, judging other people because we see things fractured. Why? Because we have inverted the order. The order is a flow from inside out, but the order becomes inverted to where the mind, rather than flow from the mind, is conditioned from the outside. What does that do? It is like flowing backwards and it creates a block right here. So the quality of consciousness becomes, by awareness, becomes clouded right here. And when this light can't flow all the way through, it casts a shadow. And so that's what sickness, illnesses, struggles in life, relational issues. It's because the bridge between our mind and our body, it is not streaming. The true essence of who we are is not freely flowing through because it's blocked right here, because this has been conditioned by a reality that is actually contrary. So for us to restore the alignment, it means that the mind needs to be reset. It means that the mind must be renewed to how it's meant to function. What this means is that we are going to take away the struggles of life, and life is going to become far more pleasant, far more enriching. And we'll see when we engage this process. And so when it comes to the bridge of the mind, thoughts, which is the language of the mind, they're also the seeds of our experience that mature into shaping our reality. And the quality of our thoughts that arise in our mind without us having to think, because thoughts will continuously arise in our mind, it's either being determined by what is in our subconscious, shaped from the world around us, or it's being imputed from our inner well-being through inspiration. It's either coming from inward based on the qualities of love, wholeness, sovereignty, and abundance, or it's being arising from fear, separation, inadequacy, and limitation. It's either coming from what flows or either coming from what's a fight. It's always coming from what thrives or it's what's coming from what's struggle. These thoughts will arise, but when thoughts arise in our mind, they take root in awareness, which is the mind, and they're filtered through perception based on our mindsets. And based on how our minds are shaped by values, beliefs, and mental conditioning, the thoughts, they then unfold into emotions, which are the fruit of our experience. In other words, we think the language of the mind, and thoughts are interpreted by our mindsets into experience defined as emotions. Without emotions, there is no experience. Emotions is what gives life its experience, its value, its meaning. But emotions are the extension, the energy of our thoughts. What emotions we feel is completely determined on how our thoughts are interpreted by how we perceive, understand life based on how our minds have been set and shaped by the values and the beliefs that we hold to. Our mindsets are the filters that our thoughts are filtered through our perception and mindsets, and they're interpreted into the emotions we feel, which is how we experience life. So if life is being experienced as stressful and frustrated and anxiety and resentment and anger, and we have all these negative emotions, and life is stressful, it's not what life is presenting, it's how our minds have been set to perceive and interpret what we're thinking. That's how it works. Now, emotions, that's the language of the body. Thoughts, the language of the mind. Emotions are the language of the body because emotions are really the language of the heart. But emotions is what determine and what reveal the alignment between mind and body. If the emotions are peaceful, harmonious, they resemble balance and harmony and order. When it's all positive vibrational frequencies, that alignment brings the streaming of the quality of our consciousness all the way through. And the quality of life is different. But the emotions define our state of being. Health, which is wholeness, is a state of being. And the emotions that we feel that determines how we are experiencing life is what determines our state of being. And it's the guide, it guides what we attract into our lives. The people, the resources, the circumstances, what we attract into what helps shape our lives very much is based on the emotions that we feel. And this is the point that where we make choices, decisions, and actions. So if we don't like the way we are living, the way our attitudes, the way our actions, the decisions we're making, the choices we're making, and where it's taking us, it's not about, I need to make better choices, I need to take more positive actions. It's not about, that's the end result. What we need is we have to have the right mindset, and we need to have our thoughts recalibrated. Our patterns of thinking must be more positive, more harmonious, and our settings of mind must be shaped by more qualities that align with truth, so that the interpretation into the emotions will be more harmonious and positive. So our quality of life, the experience that we have, and what we attract into our lives will be completely different. We are going from paddling upstream to turning the boat around and just flowing into health and prosperity. And so we want to be able to harness this and get this right. So we are meant to grow fruitfully and to thrive abundantly because our natural state is to be whole. And so we don't have to fight to learn how to do it. it is who we are. And the only thing that we have to harness and get right is the mind is conditioned to think and interpret reality in a way that blocks our true nature of being. So, this is going to require that we have to take sovereignty over our life. We have to take, and sovereignty means we have to take personal authority over our well being in every area of those 6 dimensions. From spiritually right to financially, we have to take sovereignty over it. Why? Because we are so designed and equipped to do it. The good thing about it is that you don't have to fix every area because it is all interconnected as one. Different areas of function that is so inseparable that it really is one thing functioning in different ways that has different aspects of functionality. So when one area goes out of balance, it causes the rest to wobble like a wheel. If one spoke in a wheel goes bad, the whole wheel starts to wobble. So that when we start putting things back in order, we don't have to fix every area of our lives. When things start going into order in the right flow, everything gradually starts coming back in order. So it's not how we don't need to know how to fix everything in our lives, but we need to fix it according to the creative order, which is from the inside out. But sovereignty, it is rooted in awakened identity. In other words, we have to come to that place of recognizing who we really are, that as a being of spirit, which means where my potential really lies, where my creativity, where my true intelligence, where the power to be all that I can possibly be, it comes from within. And it is the part of me that is intangible. So when it comes to things like love, peace, joy, gratitude, when it comes to compassion, when it comes to the things that are intangible, that actually matter and mean more and enriches life even greater, it's not coming from mind, it's not coming from body, it's coming from the heart. This is our true essence of being. When we awaken to our true identity, that's when we begin to tap our potential, because our potential, what we are capable of doing, is attached to who we are. And we just have to be clear on who we are. And potential, what we are capable of, always gives revelation to what our purpose is. And so identity is what gives us that value of life. And that's what many of us are missing, and we do it and we live this way unconsciously. So we seek value externally in what we have and what we own and how we are perceived by people around us, that gives us our value. And then when those things dwindle away, we get depressed and our life turns upside down because we don't have that value within ourselves. And that's the key to alignment, but it's the key to ultimate success and prosperity in life without the fight. So we are meant to reign in life. It's our birthright. But we need a perspective that is shaped by a mindset that's rooted in love for self, truth, and divine order. And that's the framework for cultivating the wholeness of health. When we lose health, we are losing the flow of that inner power between mind and body. The true essence of who we are, it naturally flows. But we don't get the fullness of its experience because right at the bridge, the mind, the central axis of how living is expressed and experienced, that it meets a lot of resistance. Resistance. We need to remove the resistance so that there is flow. But our mind is the gateway to all possibilities. I mean, all possibilities, where literally nothing is impossible to us. So when our mental state is peaceful, which is the natural vibration of wholeness, our mind and body maintain their natural synergy, and that releases our creative potential to live optimally. Why? Because when mind and body is in synergy, there is the flow, the quality of consciousness flows freely through, and life is a completely different reality and experience. But when our thought patterns and emotional responses are out of sync with peace, an inner resistance emerges from the contradiction between who we are, of which our nature is love, and our conditioned ego-centered state, which is based on fear. And that is that inner conflict that human beings live with. But it has become our norm. It has become our default norm that we don't even think that is even an issue because it's been conditioned into us to be the normal. But that inner dissonance, that loss of spiritual awareness, and when I say loss of spiritual awareness, we may accept that we are beings of spirit, but we have no conceptual and existential awareness that it is so. So I'm talking about being beyond just a mental acceptance. But because of that, that inner dissonance is when we have lost that awareness of who we are as a being of spirit. It creates a separation in our perception from, on one side, an inherent calm, which is our natural state, to life's outer uncertainties that creates this double-minded state. It's a state that we call stress. Stress, all the authorities in psychology tells us it is an inner state. It's a psychological state of mind. They call it cognitive dissonance. And it expresses itself in multiple ways, but stress really is an internal state of conflict between our true essence of being, longing for expression, being resisted by who we think we are, how the world has conditioned us to think, live, and be. And so as a result, we live backwards in that I have to get more so I could do more, so I could feel more. When the true order is, I have to be more of who I really am. So that when I do out of that, I can do far less and I can accomplish a whole lot more with a lot more ease. And in the journey, it's one of peace, joy, and gratitude. And that's the life that we want to live. But when we have this identity crisis, which creates this fractured state and double-mindedness and unstable living, it is expressed this way, which we all experience to one degree. And these are just some of the ways in how it's expressed. It is privately experiencing life one way, but publicly pretending life is another way. We do that all the time in one way to one degree or another. It is projecting self-confidence. We carry ourselves a particular way when we're outside, but at the same time, we are disturbed by what people think about us. It's false. It's not authentic. It's judging others for their improper behaviors while we try to justify our own. It is proclaiming to value truth, yet not be honest with ourselves or others. It is when we desire to be healthy, but willfully we engage in unhealthy choices and habits. And we know what we are doing. Why would somebody know that something is not good for them or it's not in their best interest to do, but yet will still willfully make the choice to do it? Why would someone do that? And at the same time say, I love myself. It's a fractured way. It's thinking one way, but saying something else. It's feeling another way, but doing something else. It is when our inner well-being is defined by outer circumstances, which is an inverted way of living. So you see, stress doesn't arise from the external circumstances of life. It is not. We perceive it this way because we are perceiving it wrongly. It is not the bills that is stress. It is not the job. It is not the traffic. It is not the children that are wayward. It is not what's happening. It's not the circumstances of life that are stressful. It is how we interpret them, react to them, shaped by the internal framework of our mindsets. And it really arises from dishonoring ourselves. That's where the rubber meets the road. We need to honor ourselves and our lives. When we learn to do that, that's a point where we will start shifting mindsets. Because we often don't do it, even though we think we do, because of how the world has taught us to interpret what matters or what we value. And that's why when we approach the finish line, statistics tells us that 95% look back and they wish that they had lived differently. But you can't rewind then. So we want to make the most of it right now. And this thing we call stress, this is the global pandemic today. This disrupts everything. This disrupts our relationships, our health, our potential, this thing we call stress. And when it starts to bring this body down in sickness and disease, all of a sudden, nothing else matters. You go to the doctor and he says, I'm sorry to say, your test came back and there is a tumor, or there's a failure in this organ. All of a sudden, running behind the money doesn't really matter that much. All of a sudden, we start to pay attention to the relationships that we were ignoring. All of a sudden, it starts to come into view what really matters when life becomes threatened. And this thing called stress is at the forefront of it. In fact, we're beginning to treat stress like it is a disease in itself. And so all these statistics from all the authorities tells us that 60 to 80% of people in modern societies, we live in a constant recurring state of stress. 90% of doctor visits, stress related. 75 to 90% of all human illness, stress related. 90% of disease caused by stress, thoughts, and belief. That's epigenetics. Chronic stress increases the odds of developing Alzheimer's and other cognitive problems by 145%. Where is it coming from? Not the world around us. It's here in our minds, our mindsets that causes us to interpret life in such a way based on the thoughts that arise, based on how our minds are oriented. This is a shift that we have to make, and it's a paradigm shift that we have to make. But when consciousness, which flows through, consciousness is what enlivens this body. It always will flow through. It's just the quality of the consciousness. The quality becomes distorted because of our mindsets. But between mind and body, it's translated through our central nervous system, our brain, which is the operating system of the mind, and the nerves, 45 miles of nerves that run through our body that runs everything. The central nervous system is how it goes from mind to body. And we want to have between mind and body in harmony. And if we can do that, the quality of the consciousness changes and the quality of life changes. And how that happens is that it extends through what we call the autonomic nervous system, and this controls everything in our body, all bodily functions. And it has two branches, and it's interesting that these two branches are consistent with where the mind is oriented, either outside or inside. The first branch, what they call the sympathetic nervous system, this one deals with stress response, what we call the fight, flight, freeze response. And this is activated when there is chronic stress. So 60 to 80% of our lives, we are living with this constantly in overdrive. Some statistics say even while we're sleeping, this is still running in overdrive. But all the medical literature tells us that what we call chronic lifestyle conditions, which develops over time, can only spring out of a seedbed of oxidation and inflammation. That is the soil and the seedbed from which all lifestyle disease will spring. And that becomes chronically enlivened when there's a sympathetic dominance in our nervous system. And this is how most of us are living. Now, this part of our nervous system is needed for emergencies. When there's a threat, when something happens, it kicks in for us to move quickly and then it settles back down. But when it's constantly running, it sets the mind in a different place, and it creates a condition of this imbalance and disorder in the body that leads to chronic disease. And then as the body begins to become compromised, so does the mind, because mind and body is inseparable. Our thinking is not as clear, it's not as sharp, it's not as fluent. The second part of the autonomic nervous system is called the parasympathetic nervous system, and this one deals with healing and recovery. When this becomes dominant, any condition in your body will heal. Any. In medicine, it's a phenomenon they call spontaneous remission or spontaneous healing, where life-threatening or terminal conditions disappear. People recover from them gradually and they go away without medical intervention. And this is the natural order that we're supposed to live in parasympathetic dominance. But this part of the nervous system remains dominant when mind and body are in coherence, in balance, in order, in alignment. And that's where living is more authentic. This is what we call homeostasis. This is where the immune system is optimal. Cellular repair and function is optimal. This is where all biological systems are coordinated and synchronized. But this part of our nervous system remains dominant when we can have a balance between mind and body. And what's throwing that off? The patterns of thinking, etc., how we're managing stress. But the central nervous system is regulated entirely by our state of mind. And our state of mind is measured by brainwave activity. You see, we can't measure our spiritual well-being. We can measure what's going on in our body, but we can measure the state of our mind through brainwave activity. And this is where we need to get it right. And so what neuroscience teaches us is that when the brain waves reflect inner harmony, that means there's positive flow of vibrations, love, peace, joy, gratitude, compassion, empathy. These things, it keeps the parasympathetic system in its natural balance of order. All systems are coordinated and running well. But when the brain waves reflect that inner dissonance defined by negative frequencies, guilt, anxiety, worry, fear, resentment, etc., it shifts the nervous system into sympathetic dominance, back into that survival overdrive mode. And so we see that we have to have our minds in right order. Now, the solution is we have to reconstruct a life of wholeness. And restoring a life of wholeness, we cannot begin to regain spiritual awareness when our mind is enslaved to a disorderly way of living that compromises mind-body imbalance. We are talking about returning to a state of being where who we are, what we believe, how we live, is one and the same. The process is that we have to gain sovereignty over our physical well-being. We can't let our physical habits rule the mind. Otherwise, we could never regain spiritual awareness. If our habits that we live by that are unhealthy continue to rule, we could not regain access. And so we have to take sovereignty over that physically, which also begins to shift things more into emotional resilience and harmony. We have to start inputting new data, thinking differently, truth centered thinking. We have to start cultivating spiritual awareness to have more spiritual resonance. And we will know because it will naturally reflect with how we start to interact with people around us, and people will see the difference. And so it is about our thoughts, our emotions, our words, and our actions being one and the same. That's what alignment is. Alignment is how we think, how we feel, how we speak, and how we act is one and the same. That type of alignment, what comes out of that, the power of creativity and potential of how we can live. The natural restoration of our body is just a reflection of it. When we have that balance, our mind works better, our body works better, and our lives produce better. And it does it in harmony and with flow. So alignment, it creates that state of mind in harmony, synchronizing our brain waves into coherence and balance. And it resets the central nervous system back to its optimal function. What does that do? That creates now, that opens up the conduit for the quality of consciousness to begin to change, to flow freely, and our lives begin to change. This is where this technology comes in. This is an extraordinary technology. What makes it so extraordinary? It doesn't have any medicine, no drugs, no substances, no ingredients. It adds nothing to the body. It puts nothing in the body. It's just the power of touch. That's elegant. And it brings the mind and body into their natural synergy. And that unlocks the potential for transformation. That's why I love this. In the process of that, our minds begin to work better and our bodies begin to function better. But the deeper part of it is accessing, giving us access to personal growth and transformation in ways that would have been more difficult without this type of synergy. It was discovered and developed by this gentleman, Jay Dhaliwal. He's the founder and the CEO of a company called the Super Patch Company, and is introducing a brand new paradigm of drug-free wellness. That statement is very profound and it can go over our heads easy, but to think of a model and an approach of wellness and restoration that includes absolutely no drugs or ingredients, it's a very new concept. In fact, this is a new era that's moving along with the change of the world that we are seeing today. It's a new approach, and it's a technology which is the only type of its kind right now that works this way. Very simple, but very profound. Let me show you a 2-minute video where he demonstrates how the technology works.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Dhaliwal. I'm the CEO and founder of Vox Life and the creator of Vox Life HPT. Today, I want to talk to you about a Harmony Neuro Patch. And what this product does is actually stimulates receptors on our skin, sending a neurosignal to our brain to help it reach homeostasis. This is the only product in the world that relies on the neurohaptic system that every single one of us has to optimize our neurology and optimize our health. Today, with the help of Dr. Mark DeBrinket, our VP of Clinical Strategy, we're going to be using an FDA-cleared 19-channel EEG headset, as well as FDA-cleared software to visualize, record, and show the impact that our technology has on our neurology and our brains to help it reach optimal performance. What we want to show today is how the Harmony Neuro Patch helps that dysregulated yellow, blue, and red colors in the brain maps transform into that healthy green homeostasis neurology that is the foundation of health and wellness. So what we're looking at right now is a neurological QEEG output of Mike's limbic system. The 19 channels are reading over 60,000 brainwaves a second and generating an output of neurofunction and brainwaves. What we want to see now is where that suboptimal red and yellow colors are. We want to see them turning as much as possible to a healthy green with the application of our HPT patch. So we've applied the patch now to Mike's arm, and within 10 seconds, you're seeing that predominant yellow and red become predominantly green. Just for clarification, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing in the world that has this output at this rate of speed without drugs, without chemicals, without electricity. That's the power of Vox HPT. So when we see a healthy green neurology, what we're looking at is a brain and a mind in homeostasis. It is operating in its optimal function. And this is so important. And this is why it's so important. So VoxLife HPT, as we demonstrated with our neuro patch, helps the central nervous system reach homeostasis in our neurology. And the reason this is so important for overall wellness and health is that neurology is the top of the pyramid of our physiological health and wellness paradigm. First is neurology at the very top, then there's chemistry, then there's biology, then there's physics and mechanics. Neurology will have an impact all the way through our entire physiology. Healthy neurology, healthy body, better wellness.
So the technology is based on Nobel Prize science. And what the patches are doing is harmonizing the brain waves. And brain waves are a reflection of our state of mind. This is well known throughout the world of neuroscience. What the patches are doing, and we will see how profoundly simple it works, but how profoundly powerful they are, is that just through the power of touch, and I'll tell you how that works in a second, they are bringing the brain waves, which is a reflection of our state of mind, which is determining how well the brain is ordering its natural functions of the body. It brings that into harmony. The demonstration that you just saw in the video, where he talked about Mike's limbic system, which is one of the emotional centers of the brain. Most of our brains are like this. Our brain waves, when we measure, a lot of beta states, erratic, disorderly, restless, not quiet, not calm, not still, not collected. And when he applied the Liberty patch, that turning green, those of us who are familiar with brainwave activity, it brings the brain more into orderly and coherent functioning. And so super patches, they really reset the brain waves back to their normal optimal resonance. It adds nothing to the body. It just brings the brain, by bringing the waves which reflect our state of mind back into a harmonious order that brings the brain back into its natural optimal function, giving more clarity to thinking, but also giving more optimal function and performance to our biological systems. That is remarkable. Now, a way how to think about it in the simplicity of it is like looking at a QR code. A QR code, which we're all familiar with, is just patterns arranged in a way that if you point a camera at it, the camera is going to convert the visual pattern into a digital signal and unlock the information that's in there. In a very similar way, the super patches, all they carry on them is a tactile pattern, a pattern that's just engraved on it. And what we know is that anything that touches the skin sends a signal to the brain. But what was discovered, two Nobel Prize laureates discovered that the sensory neurons in the skin, they actually have specialized ionic receptors that actually detect not just the touch, but the vibration of the pattern of whatever is touching the skin. It detects the vibration of it. What Superpatch has been able to discover is that different patterns will send a different vibrational signal to the brain. And over 15 years of research and development, they have discovered which pattern is going to bring the areas of our brain that's out of order and out of sync what pattern will bring it back into its natural sync. That's the simplicity of it, but that's the profound power of it as well. And so 15, well, it's now 17 years of research and development. Vibro-tactile technology is what it's called. Vibro meaning vibration, tactile meaning touch. A vibration through touch. It has now become peer-reviewed and published science, and it's now published in many prestigious journals like the International Journal of Family Medicine and Healthcare. And so we have a very credible, bona fide science of a technology. It's also gaining global recognition because it's being presented at some of these global medical research symposiums, which they also peer review to authenticate the science behind it. And it has not been seen before where you can apply something to your skin that has no ingredients in it that will actually create a synergy between mind and body and bring them back into their harmony and balance and upregulate physical and mental function. To date, Superpatch has discovered 13 different technologies or 13 different tactile patterns that influence 13 different neural networks of the brain, bringing them back into their optimal state of function, thereby introducing an approach to health, wellness, and performance in a way that does not interfere with anything in the body. What it's actually doing is tapping in to the regenerative intelligence that naturally exists from spirit, mind, body. It's tapping into that, the very thing that built and runs the body. It's tapping into that in a very clean and natural way to bring it into its natural stream and balance. So when it comes to there's one for stress, like it's called peace. If you're feeling anxious, you're feeling overwhelmed, and you apply the peace patch in a matter of moments, because they work very quickly. In a matter of moments, you start to feel calm, you start to feel center. It shifts your nervous system back to the parasympathetic side where you start to feel more calm. When it comes to things like sleep, and I'll tell you, people don't understand a lot of these things. Sleep, the REM patch is probably, I think, one of the most profound patches that they have, because over the years, we have given people things for sleep. So whether it be something natural like melatonin or pharmaceutical like another sleep aid, these things don't reset the brain to the natural sleep cycle. They bypass that, and they oftentimes don't even help us in the long term. But when you use the REM patch, it's actually resetting the circadian rhythms of the brain to where it's going to entrain the brain back to its natural sleep cycle. So the one that you saw demonstrated, the Liberty, is really for mobility. It brings the brain into balance, but increases stability, strength within a matter of seconds, and it increases strength and stability and balance by about 33% in a matter of seconds. The one for pain, immune function, which is outstanding. Performance, this is athletic performance. But if I can just say this, that this is beyond athletic performance. It gives you more strength, stamina, endurance, and so on. And again, it happens within a matter of seconds. You notice the change. But what I want to say about this and highlight is that it improves heart rate variability. When you look at the stats of the clinicals of it, it improves heart rate variability. Why is that important? Because heart rate variability is the quiet, the stillness between beats of the heart. Boop, boop. The stillness between that, which is what reflects the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic dominance. How balanced these two are is determined by that space, what they call heart rate variability. This keeps that in order. So it does a whole lot for building emotional resilience as well, apart from athletic performance. You're looking for energy. You want clean energy and alertness without chemicals, without these chemical energy drinks and so on. The boost will do it. Joy for your mood, focus for concentration, focus, memory enhancements, healthy skin, improved metabolism. It improves your metabolism by 25% at a resting rate. trying to overcome addictions, not just substance or foods, but even addictions of thinking. It helps to calm those emotional centers that contribute to addictions. And there's one for male passion or male enhancements and so on. So those are the mind body solutions that everybody needs. It enhances both physical and mental well being. They're non invasive and they're completely safe. They're FDA registered, not FDA approved, because approval is only needed for things that are ingested. And what's wonderful about it is that there are no contraindications. So, because there's no ingredients to it, it doesn't matter what medication you're taking, it doesn't matter if you have medical implants, there's no interactions with it. It's safe for children. You got a child that's 2 or 3 years old and they have a flu or fever, you put the immune patch on them, which is defend, and you'll see how they work. They're effective. They work almost immediately. This is a technology that's tested, it's proven, and more so, it's affordable. The real value of super patches is when you combine them, because when you combine them, and you can harness more coherence in your brain and have greater rhythm and flow, you're going to see far greater functionality between mind and body and in your state of being, and how much you can really do towards that transformative journey. And so that's excellent. So just to conclude, unlocking that potential that we all possess. If we were to get into the practice of spiritual meditation and learning to harness our minds, and we begin a process of, could we do all of this without super patches? Absolutely. But the average person today that I work with, they're not taking the time to dedicate, to commit, to discipline themselves, and they struggle with these things. And I understand that. I get it. But this becomes now a way to make it more accessible. You see, the signaling that it gives, it creates an environment for rapid neurological alignment, and it makes mindset shifts more natural and more accessible because it quiets a lot of the noise, the restlessness of the mind. But here's the thing, what they call neuroplasticity, which is how the brain rewires itself, here's the real value. When you're using these super patches in combination and consistent over time, and the brain rewires itself to this new entrainment of balance, you start to notice the difference in your thinking, the clarity of your thinking, less anxious, better decision making. You feel more fluent, but you have to let your brain entrain to it. But while you're doing that, while your brain is going through that, and that can take months for some people, but you're actually going to be feeling and functioning better in the process. This is something that you have to think of to make part of your lifestyle. You may not need every single patch, but you want these to be part of your lifestyle as part of your insurance to help to make sure your systems always run optimally. And so in real world application, it is supported by a medical advisory board, which works along with the research and the development. So I want to encourage you to, as you examine your life, as you reflect, as you take a look at yourself, as you consider the true essence of your being, as you consider the true nature of your being, as you consider looking at your mind and how much of it you control or how much of it controls you, that to consider a journey of getting your lives aligned. Why? Because we all want to live more effectively. And since the mind is the axis of how we experience life, super patches become a strategic support to bridge this journey of transformation. And so I want to invite you to join our community. We have a Facebook page, it's called Patch and Go. It has thousands of testimonies of how lives are being changed by this technology all over the world. And I want to invite you to try it for yourself. And the way to do that is to become a member, and it's a one-time cost of $40, which gives you access to wholesale pricing. And once you have access to wholesale pricing, the regular price is $60 for a month's supply of any one of the patches. They're all the same price. But $60 for what this technology does for a month supply is, I mean, very, very affordable and more than reasonable. However, as a member of the community, you can get them at the wholesale pricing, and we recommend the Flex Force Starter Pack. This 175 here includes that one-time $40 membership, and you get to buy three, order three of your choice, and you get one free. So you're getting four for the price of three. And so that works out to being like $33 for a month supply of a technology that will change your life. Let me tell you, as far as I'm concerned, it's an almost insane price for something of this quality. Now, the patches that I have here, you're not necessarily, you can, it could be any four of your choice. Now you can do that, but I want to strongly encourage you to look at Super Patch as part of what supports your journey to living a more effective life, as a bridge, as a support for a better way of living. Now, as for this month, the company has an offer where instead of a $40 for membership, it's only $1. So this comes down to like $136 to be part of our community. And then you could I invite you to join our workshops where what we talked about in harnessing alignment, where we go through the practical application of how we can do that. As part of our community, you also have the option to become an entrepreneur where you have where you can build your own globally scalable businesses. And it's a model, economic model that's based on compound growth, which is really quite unique. So if that's something that may resonate with you, you have the opportunity where you can, there's a business presentation that we do that talks about the concept and the potential of it. And if it's something that resonates with you, because we all need to position ourselves for a better financial future. When we see the world that we're living in today, we are in a very different world and things are changing. They're changing very rapidly. And for example, here in the United States, this year alone, 150,000 people have already lost their jobs to this new advent they call artificial intelligence. They didn't see that coming, and believe me, that's just the beginning of what's going to become eventually in the next few years, millions that's going to lose. So we got to prepare ourselves. So this is something that's worth looking at. If you want to do that, you scan the QR code, you can get the Zoom link to our meetings. Otherwise, one of our partners that might have shared this opportunity to be on the call, they may be able to share the link with you, and it's going to be posted in our group chat. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for being on the call, for staying the course with me throughout. Let me just, sorry about that. Thank you all for being here. I hope that I would have shared something with you that when you lie in your bed tonight, it will be turning in your mind. It will inspire you, encourage you to look at your life and want to upgrade it, because you know what? We are all capable of it because it's inherently built into us. We just have to be able to release it, and we have a way of how we can do that. So I want to wish you guys a wonderful week ahead of you, a restful night tonight, and say once again, thank you, God bless you, and perhaps we'll see you on tomorrow's call for those of you who are interested in looking at that side of it. Good night.